Last week, I was watching some YouTube videos and decided to have a look at the flat earth conspiracy idiots. To be completely honest, the only reason I looked at it was because of the little chuckle my friend and I had several months ago. If that conversation hadn't taken place, I honestly wouldn't have taken the time to click on the video link that day. So, I decided to have a look at what these kooks were ranting on about, so I could destroy their argument with simple common sense in the comments section, and possibly make a video about how retarded these flat earthers were. Probably trying to get attention and steer honest people away from the important topics. I'll tell you that some of the flat earth information could fall into this category, nonsense. However, when I began to look at the flat earth theory, I had all these preconceived notions about falling off the edge and the laws of gravity and the beautiful planets in the night sky. I thought about theoretical physicists like Einstein, Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson. That smart guy must be way too busy to debunk this nonsense. When I continued considering the evidence I was looking at, I honestly wrote off any valid points as a strange coincidence that could easily be explained because I knew for a fact that the Earth isn't flat. Now, we need to start from the beginning. When you think of a word or a concept, or if you're pondering or imagining things as most people do when they have a break at work, the difference between your real eye and your mind's eye is that your pineal gland doesn't use light to base its image rendering, but rather a more obscure source, which is essentially self-generated by you, along with the visual experiences you've had related to the topic you may now be pondering in your mind's eye. Now, the advertisers of the world have made it their life's mission and full-time job to take advantage of your mind's eye from as early on as possible. Books, cartoons, documentaries, and of course advertisements are all designed to form associations between certain ideas and images in your mind's eye. Advertisers are very good at this, and they're targeting younger and younger people in order to manipulate our collective mind's eye. Ultimately, advertisements use very deep psychology to lead us towards buying more of their stuff. And their stuff can be anything from soda pop to the fact that man has set foot on the moon. A quote from Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, aka propaganda. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of political or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public's mind. It's no secret that our tax dollars have funded programs like NASA to the tune of countless billions, probably even trillions of dollars over the decades since NASA was created. One concept I'd like you to imagine firmly as possible is a globe spinning at 1,000 miles per hour at its equator. However, try not to associate this concept with our world. I realize you don't have a lot of motivation to research this topic, as a major part of your intelligence is telling you to dismiss what I'm telling you and go on about your business. That's fine if you do, but just know that you are very close to understanding the truth. I'm going to give you an example of how the current accepted model of our world simply does not stack up with reality. Question: how can a commercial flight, which averages about 500 miles per hour, from New York to LA, have an identical duration with a flight from LA to New York? Assuming, for argument's sake, the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour eastward, and each plane can travel at 500 miles per hour relative to the ground below. If the Earth is indeed spinning at 1,000 miles per hour to the east, the plane going west could simply hover in place, and the Earth would naturally spin towards it at 1,000 miles per hour. Furthermore, the eastbound flight would have to go 1,000 miles per hour just to stand still relative to the spinning Earth, and would still need to generate another 500 miles per hour beyond the 1,000 miles per hour mark. And this simply cannot be. If you can imagine a time not that long ago, scientists were debating the spinning globe theory, which was a relatively new and hotly debated concept. Most of the scientific community laughed in the faces of this new theory, as everyone knew the Earth was not a spinning globe. So, we're in a room with two scientists debating the new globe theory.
Based on my calculations, I assert that the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour near the equator.
How do you know the Earth is spinning?
Well, look at the stars, mate. The Earth must be spinning to cause the apparent movement in the stars.
How in the hell can the Earth be spinning at around 1,000 miles per hour, and we don't just fly off the bloody planet at 1,000 miles per hour?
Well, here's how it works, mate. Since the Earth is so big, even though space is a vacuum, the Earth sort of pushes away at all the nothingness of space. But the nothing of space, pushes back.
So you're trying to tell me that nothing is pushing down upon me with perfect amount of force in order to negate the perfect balance, the weight of the planet pushing up on my feet at 1,000 miles per hour? And what are the odds that our planet is spinning in the perfect speed to account for the exact amount of gravity that's pushing down on my feet in perfect balance with the Earth rotating an arbitrary 1,000 miles per hour?
Well, I don't know the odds of that happening, but I think the Earth is a globe, so it makes sense to me.
So what happens if we get too close to the North Pole?
What do you mean?
What I mean is, if gravity is pushing down on my head with the perfect amount of force to keep me stuck to the Earth while it's spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, then if we get too close to the North Pole, we should be squashed like a bug.
What do you mean, squashed like a bug?
Well, if the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, then say 100 feet from the North Pole, it will only be spinning at 1,308 feet per hour. That's about 1/4 mile per hour, give or take. So we're talking about a ratio of 4,000 to 1 between the centripetal force at the equator and the centripetal force at the North Pole.
No, silly. You don't understand gravity. Gravity is pushing down on the planet evenly at all points.
I know that, you twit, but you don't seem to understand centripetal force. The centripetal force generated by the weight of the Earth going 1,000 miles per hour would be 4,000 times less if you're standing 100 feet from the North Pole. If gravity were pushing down with that much force at the North Pole, a 175-pound man at the equator would weigh 700,000 pounds at the North Pole.
Right, well, you've never been to the North Pole, but if you did, you would weigh about 700,000 pounds.
Actually, people have gone to the North Pole, and were never squashed like a bug. If you can understand this basic flaw in gravity, you have just proved that our world is not a spinning globe. Some people will say, but we've circumnavigated or sailed around the globe. Well, we've sailed around all right, but not around the globe. Most of the people who claim to know that the Earth isn't flat have never considered the true, correct flat Earth model. Our corporate owners have programmed us to instantly assume, like a knee-jerk reaction, that any person claiming that our world is flat must be some type of raving lunatic with no understanding of science. Your mind's eye will come up with all sorts of factual data to reassure yourself that our world is a globe spinning around the sun in the Milky Way galaxy hurling through space. Believe me when I tell you the person in this conversation with major delusions is the one who believes our world is a globe hurling through space. I'm not calling you crazy, but you have been fooled. The North Pole certainly attracts a compass needle towards the north. However, if you look at the flat Earth model, you'll realize that you can sail around in a giant flat circle, keep the needle pointed to the right, and simply head west. You'll see the false globe model has cleverly taken control of how you view the world, so at this point it still may be difficult for you to understand what I'm telling you, but it is the honest, verifiable, 100% truth. The painful truth is, without considering for a moment that our world is not a spinning globe, you will never be able to review the real facts and subsequently weigh them logically in both models. This means you cannot come to a rational, logical conclusion until you consider that you have been lied to. There are lots of problems that people need to understand in their own personal mind's eye in order to know for certain that I'm not just pulling your leg or that the alternate correct model actually works. I'm going to try and cover a couple of arguments that I've heard people try to use in order to perpetuate or justify the globe image in their mind's eye. When they do this, people are really just trying to understand how the flat Earth model works. And I can tell you that I've studied both models and can assert, again, with full certainty that the flat Earth model is perfectly sound and logical and answers all of the questions left hanging around with the globe theory. There are some people whose lives will change because of this, and those would definitely be the science professors and the people at NASA, who have tied up their entire lives in the false globe model. If you are a science professor or an independent scientific researcher and you happen to stumble across this topic, you need to grow some balls and get this topic into the mainstream. One of the questions I get a lot is, but we orbit the sun. Wrong. The sun and the moon and all the celestial bodies are actually orbiting the magnetic center, which is found at the North Pole, the center of the possibly infinite plane. The flat Earth model perfectly explains the seasons as the radius of the sun's orbit around the center alternately gets tighter and looser, causing the sun to shine on different areas of the flat Earth at different strengths depending on the time of the year. Another question is, well, what about the moon landing? What about NASA? Well, I hate to break it to you, but NASA has been pushing terrible lies into the scientific record, as well as our collective consciousness. Regular people and scientists without rocket ships and unlimited budgets cannot verify or discredit NASA's facts. In reality, if you trust NASA, you would inherently have no reason to argue with the facts or conclusions that they assert, especially if you're a scientist relying on your reputation to make a living, or if you're studying trying to pass an exam. Just because you read something in a textbook doesn't necessarily mean that the person who wrote the textbook had any viable grasp on the true place we have in the universe. The International Space Station is no exception. Several people have pointed out air bubbles in space, scuba tanks, snorkels, and even a near drowning during a spacewalk on the space station.
The International Space Station in the Space Shuttle Atlantis currently orbiting 215 statute miles above the Pacific Ocean.
Okay, Danny, you can retrieve the toolbox bag that you all left out there. Copy that.
The International Space Station in the Space Shuttle Atlantis currently orbiting 215 statute miles above the Pacific Ocean.
Okay, Danny, you can retrieve the toolbox bag that you all left out there. Copy that.
CGI has improved a great deal in the last few years, and it turns out all of the International Space Station spacewalks, all of that stuff were contrived and most likely filmed in a large water tank right here on Earth. The interviews with the ISS astronauts include blooper reels, which prove they are either suspended with strings or they're simply using a blue screen to fake the footage. NASA has enjoyed unlimited budget and all the full cooperation of the mainstream media in order to pull off the single greatest deception in the history of the world, not to mention the most expensive. Our tax dollars have footed the bill for this pack of liars to the tune of hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. Did you know that there are entire websites dedicated to complaining that NASA doesn't get enough funding? Rest assured that NASA has taken our wealth, lied to our faces, spoiled our collective understanding of our real place in the universe, and will continue to bleed us dry, pretending to fly around in outer space and plan all these phony missions to the wandering stars known as the planets, and all we get in return is their sweaty jock straps. Now, all the while, if we could simply travel across the natural boundary to our world known as the Antarctic, the true frontier would begin. But not a pointless frontier into outer space, a totally doable, easily obtainable frontier right next door, literally. Now, due to the Antarctic Treaty signed by all world military powers in the 1950s, it is illegal to travel to the Antarctic without the express written permission of said world governments and only for peaceful scientific research, under the strict supervision of the military and with major limitations. Right now, it's actually illegal to bring or store any fuel anywhere near the Antarctic. This treaty isn't up for debate for several decades. I ask each and every one of you to consider the facts and weigh them in both models. If you have any questions about the alternate correct model, I would suggest that you join the International Flat Earth Research Society, where you can see tons of verifiable scientific evidence that the globe is a hoax, and we live on a world that is stationary, peaceful, and serene, just as it seems. Sleep well, my friends.
One rather laughable claim I hear is that the International Space Station can't be a hoax because I can see it from my house. Well, can you see people inside it from your house? No, there is clearly something up there orbiting. It just happens to be empty and has never been manned. It's just an orbiting tin can. And the fact that it's empty means it won't really be subject to any forces moving it back and forth, and all the considerations I mentioned with people like Chris Hadfield going through the station at breakneck speed aren't a problem. So it's very possible to have an empty orbiting tin can.